reading through Mark 15:21 through 41, the crucifixion of Jesus. They compelled a passerby who was coming in from the country to carry his cross. It was Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. Then they brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of a skull, and they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him, and divided his clothes amongst them, casting lots to decide what each should take. It was 9 o'clock in the morning when they crucified him. The inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." And with him they crucified 2 bandits, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "Aha! You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests, along with the scribes, were also mocking him amongst themselves and saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now, so that we may see and believe." Those who were crucified with him also taunted him. When it was noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. At 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "Listen, he is calling for Elijah." And someone ran, filled a sponge with sour wine, and put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink, saying, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to take him down." Then Jesus gave a loud cry and breathed his last, and the curtain of the temple was torn in 2 from top to bottom. Now when the centurion, who had stood facing him, saw that in this way he breathed his last, he said, "Truly this man was God's son." There were also women looking on from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, and Mary the mother of James the younger, and of Joseph and Salome. These used to follow him and provided for him when he was in Galilee, and there were many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem. Within 24 hours, Jesus goes from celebrating a meal with friends to being arrested, falsely accused, abandoned, beaten, and crucified. His death was brutal emotionally, physically, and spiritually. He takes on all the wrath that we deserve because he sees us as worth the sacrifice. God is so grieved by losing the Son that he tears his robe, the curtain of the temple. When I read this scripture, I think one of the things that really stands out to me is just all of the emotions conveyed. There's a lot of anger, a lot of derision, self-righteousness, contempt, and unfortunately, those feelings lead to actions in the scripture. They lead to violence, injustice, physical pain that honestly I can't even imagine, and an utter disregard for human life. And when I read this, I can relate to the disciples because when Jesus came, they kind of expected him to be this war hero, this general, that he was going to be like King David and rule over them. And when they see the evil in the world, and even when I see the evil in the world, the only thing I can kind of think of is like the only thing these people understand is violence. They only understand anger and hate. And if we want to make them understand, then we have to meet them at their level. And I think that's what the disciples were really thinking of. And, they just had this idea that power is what people respect. And so that's what you have to have. And it's kind of ironic because in the moment where we start thinking like that, we become just like the people who are actually crucifying Jesus. You're kind of hit with the reality of my sin is angry, it's self-righteous, it can be prone to violence and injustice. And the amazing thing about the cross is Jesus' response to evil. His response is a submission to God's will, and it's really an example of what is good. And I think it's Jesus' response that really gives me hope because it's my sin, my evil that put him in that place. And instead of responding to that with wrath, what I deserve, he responds with goodness. So that gives me the hope that when I see evil in the world or I see evil in myself, that there's goodness for me and goodness that I can respond with.